So I'm Peter, and I want to welcome you to the Eastside Freedom Library. We've been here 5.5 years. How many of you are here for the first time? Wow, great. So I want to encourage you to take some time to poke around. We now have about 21,000 plus books. These are the books of the Mullen Archives. We have shelved the books by the major donations. So we have Hy Berman's books, Naomi Sheeman's books, Paula Rabinowitz's books, Fred Ho's books, my books. And we, some of it was motivated by, we knew that in 1991, Meridell Lesueur's family offered Meridell's library to the Minnesota Historical Society, and they turned it down because the books were written in. And I think it's like the stupidest thing ever. So we want books that are written in, and we want the people who use them to know who wrote the marginal comments in the books, and it adds so much value to them. So the books don't circulate. The books have to be used here, but it's really a lovely space. It's kind of not a bad thing to be stuck here and spend time with Orso, the library dog. Our focus is labor, immigration, racial, and gender justice. Many of the books are fiction, poetry, theater, visual art, various ways of telling the stories of the struggles for justice on different fronts. And so it was not at all a surprise to me that I would be excited about having Sheila's book in a conversation here, and my good friend Colleen Bell, because it fits so much in our mission here in the library as a way of telling stories, bringing focus to issues of gender and class justice, and it's just an outstanding work of art. So what we try to do when we can is have people who have read the book, an author who's in the spotlight, and we ask a couple of people to respond, and then we go to the audience. So we were able to do that tonight, and maybe, Colleen, will you function a little bit as the... Great, because we were counting on Kaylee, and she's not able to be with us tonight. We have flyers for upcoming events. I want to encourage you also to pick up some flyers while you're here. We have some really great book events coming up. And we have a great improvised music concert Saturday night with Douglas Ewart, and a combo of 8 brilliant improvising musicians. So there's lots going on here, and we would love for you to come back again, those of you who are here for the first time. So I'm going to turn things over to my friend Colleen Bell, who teaches at Hamlin and has been an advocate for social justice for a long time.
We don't know how
long.
long.
So, and Colleen had a lot to do with stimulating the idea to do this thing. So, and let me just say, we are being filmed, videoed. I can never, it's like, it's not video, it's not filmed. Whatever it is, streamed. So we are being live streamed on Facebook, and that will continue to live on Facebook. And we will be posting that this is Carla Reilly, who does this out of the goodness of her heart and her political commitments. And we are so cool, we have our own YouTube channel now. And so the video will ultimately be lodged on the Eastside Freedom Library YouTube page. So, and we've put envelopes out. We're trying to encourage people to make donations. We're in the throes of a complete makeover of our HVAC system here, which is a quick $250,000. So help us make this work possible.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. I just want to say a couple words of introduction, and then Tonja and Sheila will introduce themselves, and then we are going to ask who's in the audience. So we'll pass the mic, just so that we can have some fuel for conversation. So Peter said most of it. I've been teaching at Hamlin for 30 years. This year I'm retiring. But I will keep working with women who are or have been incarcerated. Just a word about the handout, and if you did not get one, please wave, and we'll make sure you do. The facts that are at the top might be a way of framing this conversation. The rest of it for your note-taking and future reading. So, Tonja, take it away.
Good evening. So before we get started, I really want to give a land acknowledgement to the land that we're on. We call it, this is Dakota land, and we want to acknowledge and bring forth the truth of the genocide and the trauma that happened on this land and continues to happen today, but also calling out the resilience and the joy that has come forth from that. I also want to say that these kind of talks, sitting in front of here, I'm not an expert, we're not experts, right? Everybody here has wisdom and knowledge that we want to share, and so please do not feel like you can't say anything. If you have a question, if you have a comment, we're having a conversation. And that's really why we're here, right, is for connection, to connect with each other and to have conversation and continue to talk about things and to get more knowledge, gain more knowledge, but really about connecting with each other on some pretty tough things. Along with that, this is gonna have some pretty tough content in it. And whatever your experience is, whatever brought you here, we just want to make sure that you allow yourself space if you need to leave the space, if you need to talk with someone, if you need to, if you have questions, if you need to acknowledge that I went through that too, or this is what my experience was. Don't feel like you can't, and please don't leave here if you are feeling some way, don't leave here without connecting, because that's the most important thing. Again, my name's Tonja. I am an incarceration survivor. I spent 25 years in and out of the system, starting when I was 12. I'm a revolutionary mother of 3 boys. This most fieriest redhead that I've ever met in my entire life blows me away every day with the things that he says and the wisdom that he carries. And I also have a 25-year-old and a 19-year-old, but this fiery redhead that was sent from out of nowhere has taught me more about life than I ever imagined. I'm an Indigenous woman of mixed blood, and I'll get into more of my story, but I will just give a little bit of what I do now. I am the founder of an organization called We Rise. It's a leadership collective of formerly incarcerated women. We're doing systems and policy, creating systems and policies. I don't want to say we're doing reform or change, because we want to build our own system of support and power, and we do that in a restorative, transformative, and healing justice lens. That's partnered with the Minnesota Prison Doula Project. We're able to do a lot of work through there, a lot of amazing work. I'm a 2019 Soros Justice Fellow, and a 2019 Reimagining Communities Fellow. I'm the first formerly incarcerated person to sit on the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission and rock their world. I also sit on the task force of justice-involved women and girls with the DOC here, and on the side I run a bail project, or a bail fund. So now we're also opening up women's housing, which will be the first women's reentry housing, and it's very community-based, and then looking to build cooperative housing where we would take back the land, take back the power, and build our own world and start living that. So I'm going to pass it on, but when we go around and you say your name, if you want to just talk about, maybe give us one sentence about what brought you here so we know who's here.
I'm really
honored to be here with both of you tonight. My name is Sheila O'Connor, and I'm a writer, also a professor at Hamlin. And how we have connected is around this book that I have just published this fall called Evidence of V. And Evidence of V chronicles the story of girls who were incarcerated actually from 1911 until, well, the 1990s at the Minnesota Home School for Sauk Centre, but specifically in the early part of the century when girls were incarcerated for very long sentences, inexplicably long sentences for immorality, and the majority for immorality, a few for incorrigibility, and that was it. Basically, no crimes. They weren't charged with crimes, they hadn't committed crimes. And I came upon this research a bit by accident, looking into the story of my maternal grandmother, somebody I did not know, and accessing her file with permission of the court, the Hennepin County District Court. And when I encountered the file that is archived actually at the Minnesota History Center, all these files are sealed for 100 years. So when I encountered the file, the first thing that I saw in the file was her sentence to this place, Sauk Centre, for 6 years at the age of 15. And that was devastating for me, the knowledge that a 15-year-old had been locked up for 6 years as an inmate. The thing I didn't understand was what had she done? What had she done? And I had the file. I had everything that I knew. She was pregnant with my mother. But there was no crime in the file. And it literally took me the next, well, that was in 2001, so here we are. It took me years to find out that, in fact, there had been no crime, and that this was a part of history that has been, it's just a very little known part of history. There are academics that have written about it, but it's not something that is widely known. She was incarcerated along with all the other girls in Minnesota and the tens of thousands across the United States. This happened in every single state. Every girl that was incarcerated at the age of 12, or from the age of 12, whatever age, up until the age of 21. So anyway, that was what kind of brought me to the material and to the story. And for me, the sense that as I researched 1935 and then I researched the present, the realization that not much had changed, which was shocking. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here to hear from people doing this work right now that can speak to the bridge between my own history and my own discoveries to the ways in which those have everything to do with what's happening today.
Do you want to start over? Makes sense. Just want to pass. Just your name and why you're here.
I'm Jeanette. I'm a Minnesotan. Been here my whole life. I'm here to learn. I'm not aware of a lot of this.
My name's Heather. I've been here a few times for the reading and stuff, and I saw this on Facebook and thought it was really interesting, and it's crazy to think this happened and know nothing about it, living here your whole life, kind of thing.
I'm Kim. I am a historian doing some work on Caboose Memorial Hospital in St. Paul, which is a home for unwed mothers, where my mother had her first baby and then surrendered her for adoption. But I also started my career in the corrections field, but only lasted 3 years before I started.
I'm Steve. I'm with Kim. And I'm here to learn.
My name is Amber. I'm a PhD student at the University of Minnesota. I do a lot of work on criminal justice, and I'm exploring girls' and boys' experiences in the juvenile justice system, especially around things like sexual abuse.
My name is Kelsey. I'm a first and second grade teacher at Lucy Laney. And This is my daughter. She's a kindergartner at Wisconsin. Yeah, I met Sheila a long time ago and read a couple of her older books, but haven't read this one yet.
I'm Pat, her mom. And I read The Evidence of B, and I was so interested in that time period. I was so shocked that all that happened. That's why I'm
My name is Holly. I work with reentry for mostly male people who are coming back from murdering others, mostly. I have worked with a couple other types. So I have one sexual offender and one DUI offender. I am a survivor of sexual assault ×2. And when I was in high school, my mother almost sent me to a boarding school because the principal touched me.
Hi, Mom. I am a good friend of Sheila's, and I've read all of her books and promote all of her books. This one is just so profound because it just speaks to so many injustices. I'm a social worker by trade and work with young families and helping to kind of strengthen the parent-child relationship. And I've recently been introduced to the Doer Project and just the work that it's how painful it is for those women to have to, especially those women that are mothers, to have to be separated from their children and try to figure out how to navigate systems to be able to support their kids. So I have lots of interest in this field, and as well as I go back to when Sheila was, learning some of these interesting things, and I think I could talk about her book all day long. So, so thank you. I don't know where you want me to go.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jane. I'm also a historian, and I study the history of commercial sex economies. And in my daytime, I'm also one of the organizers of the Minneapolis chapter of the Sex Workers Outreach Project, and we're a local social justice organization that works to advance the human rights of people in sex trades in whatever the circumstances. So I have a specific interest in this project.
Are we gonna have kind of?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Why don't we come this way? Do we have another one?
Yeah, we do.
We can kind of, maybe this will be easier to pass that way
Okay.
and come back around.
Yeah.
Okay.
My name is Christy. I am a social worker. I've spent the last 19 years working in corrections, specifically with justice-involved girls. So I'm a colleague of Tonja's and also Kaylee, who's not able to be here. I also serve on the task force with Tonja, and I'm really passionate about making sure that girls involved in the justice system have community-based options, because we're so quick to send them to out-of-home placements. And out-of-home placements very far away from home, and we currently still do that today. And so my belief is that we do that because we don't have the community-based options, and so we're not sending violent girls to Arizona. We're sending girls who have been sexually exploited and trafficked and traumatized far away. So that's my interest in.
I'm in California, but I made it back home. I started volunteering in juvenile lockup facilities out there, so I've been doing it about 14 years now, mainly working with the girls every week. And shocking what's happening behind closed doors that a lot of people don't know about. I'm looking to get more involved in some of the organizations that are working with girls on the outside here, because being a volunteer inside here means I'm prohibited from having contact with them when they get out, which makes no sense.
My name is Michelle Kelly, and I grew up on the east side, but now I live south up here a bit. And I'm not surprised by this and what's going on. I'm an educator. I used to teach high school biology and chemistry, and I just left a job that I was at for 18 years where I did outdoor environmental and education here in the metro, working with a lot of underserved groups and such. And And I came from a very traumatic background in childhood. And it just breaks my heart how so many get caught up in a system that's not just and not fair. And women and girls especially are so powerless. And I'm honored to be here with amazing people who are doing wonderful work out there. I'm so glad to see that because I get dispirited. And I too would like to connect somewhere. I'm in transition in my life and I want to contribute in a meaningful way. And I really care about youth and girls.
Hi, I'm MJ Beans. I've been here often. I'm a historian like you. I work in working house history, but more particularly lately, I'm doing. I'm a part of the program in comparative history of women, gender, and sexuality, and I'm actually doing research all over the U.S. on girls as agents of history and trying to teach about girls in new ways and also child in new ways. And also, I see Jane and I work together on the journal Gender and History.
Hi, I'm Gail Danaker, and I'm a board member of Save Our Sons, which is an allied organization, and we work with African American youth and young men who are both within the juvenile detention system and trying to keep kids out. And some of you came to a program here with Melvin Carter about his book, Diesel Heart, which I would recommend to everyone. And I'm also on the fundraising committee of the library here. So, of course, I encourage everybody to make a contribution if you can.
Hi, I'm Ron Williams. I'm retired, so I get to do what I want, which is take philosophy courses at U of M. One of those courses was taught by Naomi Sheeman. Now you've been told that some of her books are here, which is interesting. Well, of course I took last semester was moral problems in contemporary society. And I did a project with 3 other students on mass incarceration. So that's why I'm here.
Other way. You're gonna have to kind of zigzag around now, I think.
Hi, I'm Kathy, and I'm glad to be here tonight too. My background is like a high school and middle school social studies teacher. I've always been, now that I'm retired, like I've always had on my passion of what's out there that really has been left out of history books and omitted from understandings. And now that I have more time, I'm really kind of in a place where I feel overwhelmed and yet deliberate at the same time about taking some strong actions in a direction that has political and social justice implications. I'm volunteering at a school right now in Minneapolis, and I see trauma. I see kids that are hurting, and I'm looking for ways to support them, and also been involved with the Restorative initiative. So, thank you.
I'm Angie Setzer. I live in St. Paul here, and I am a graduate recently of the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota. My final project was around barriers to public assistance for formerly incarcerated women, specifically former drug felons. So I have an interest in that, and I want to, now that it's done, I want to stay involved. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Dick, I'm just here to listen, and the brochure or whatever was compelling.
There's 2 people behind you. Oh, sorry.
We'll do her this way. So we're just saying our names and then what brought us here.
You can go first. All right. My name is Juliet Mitchell, and I have a girls group that focuses on girl self-discovery. And some of these girls are already in the criminal justice system, or we're doing things that, so they won't be, or if they're in, that's going to help them get on a better track by knowing who they are and how they show up in the world.
My name is Samaya, and I'm here because I was invited, and it sounded like something nice, considering I'm young, so yeah.
I'll do this one now. Yeah.
You go ahead.
I'm Monica. I'm here because I care, and I'm here to listen and understand, and I'm just grateful.
Okay. Thank you for all the dancing with the
Yeah.
My name is Hope. My name is Hope, and I'm a retired St. Paul school teacher, and I'm just really interested in Minnesota history of all kinds. Read your book right away when it came out, because Tokens of Grace is still one of my very favorite books ever.
Thank you.
And grew up in St. Cloud in the 60s. Graduated from high school in 71, and my mom was a social worker, so Sauk Centre was always kind of a thing. You know, girls would disappear from school, never really quite knew what happened to them. And we also have a daughter who's 30 now, who at 15, if she lived, you know, in an earlier time, probably would have gotten sent to Sauk Centre. She had spent a little time in the juvenile justice system.
I'm Dan. I remember Tokens of Grace.
This is the 30 years ago, so this is amazing.
Well, I was a bookseller then, so you came to read. And I've been reading about this book and fascinated by it. But it also occurred to me, I had a brother who was born with Down syndrome who was institutionalized, because in the early 50s, that happened, and his first placement was at Sauk Centre. And I remember my mother talking about the care he got from the young women who were there. And so suddenly that
That's
connection
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm Marty. I'm a friend of Sheila's. Like Molly, got the chance to see the identity of B evolve over the years while Sheila's found more about her. And I know Sheila came up here from Florida just for this.
I did.
So I had no
Last night.
excuse for not driving over from anybody.
There's so many. Do you want to go back this way first?
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm retired. I come here quite often to try to pick up some of the wisdom that's so freely available. I did have a family connection in Sauk Centre, not with the institution, but especially in the 90s and the early 2000s. And I hardly knew anything about the institution. I vaguely knew that there was something there, but it never came up in conversation. So it was well below the Vikings. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about it.
Hang anybody up here. Jinga.
I'm Karen, and I'm a friend of Sheila's also, and I just loved all of her books. And I saw this on Facebook and wanted to come and listen.
Hi, I'm Kerri, and I'm a friend of Karen's. And my son went through some serious trauma and affected everyone, family, friends. And so when reading the book, we've been together, the three of us, working with my son on his trauma, and just reading the book brought back so many memories. That trauma also is on a cellular level. And so that part was important, but also the part in Minnesota history, I'm from Minnesota, in the book, that it was just a book and that I feel everybody needs to read. It's just so important, and reading this about so much sexual abuse, because that's what happened to my son too, and he's disabled. And so I just feel like I wanted to be here tonight.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I'm friends with Karen and Kerri, and they told me 2 days ago that I should read Evidence of Me, and I finished it. I got it done in like 24 hours, and it was just a very compelling book, and I wanted to come and hear more about it.
Hi, I'm Julie Kay. I'm an assistant professor at Metro State. I teach courses in literature and specifically American literature and Asian American literature. I'm here for multiple reasons. One is my dissertation research, which I'm trying to revive, focused on juvenile delinquency in the U.S. from the turn of the 19th century, turn of the 20th century to the 1960s. And so I'm trying to reacquaint myself because my expertise is more based in Chicago and New York.
My name's Anya.
And why are you here?
Because my mom's
It's gonna see a little bit.
Hi, my name's Pat Darling, and I'm a volunteer collaborator here, and I'm here to put in a plug that you too can volunteer and come and put some energy here. There are a lot of benefits that come with that. I'm also an incarceration teacher. I've been out in the system since 1980, or was it 88? 88. And so I've had the boys and I've had the girls, and I would like to confirm the sexual abuse in terms of like one of the triggering points for trauma that can make a girl's life go terribly wrong has to do with what happens to young women between the ages of 10, sometimes 9, and 15. And so as a writing teacher, I've heard a lot of those stories. I'm currently teaching research writing at Shakopee. And but through the grace of God go I, because I hadn't had the privilege of being a teacher's daughter. I probably would have been sent away somewhere. I was sent away to a home for unwed mothers. But I was one of the incorrigibles in high school. I was a straight A student, but I had to be a bad girl to prove to people that I could be one of them. And so I've always had that at my back. And my son was adopted out, and I got to go places and start my life over. But I think this is a good theme to cover, and we all seem to have a lot in common in terms of the number of social workers and teachers and writing fans in the crowd tonight.
So I just want to confirm, are there books for sale in the back?
I'm the bookseller.
All right. So if anybody hasn't read Evidence of Me and would like to, you will be able to get one tonight.
I think I'll be signing.
I can get a sign. I'll sign you.
Perfect. So here's what we're thinking. Tanya's going to say a little bit more, and then Sheila will talk about a little, and if we beg her, she might read a little snip. And we want to hear from you.
So it's interesting because I speak a lot. I do a lot of talking, and I was sitting here realizing and just kind of connecting with myself on how I'm feeling right now and just in my body. And I have realized that I have chosen to, or maybe not chosen, but out of survival, have not connected with my experiences so much of being a girl that's been incarcerated. It's been my journey of healing and my journey of acknowledging what incarceration has done to me as a person, as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, a girl, a child, has been a extremely long and painful and but also revolutionary experience for myself. And I used to never feel, right, like I said, I couldn't. When we talk about why girls are incarcerated, why women are incarcerated, it's because they're of survival, right? It's not, I don't ever remember being a child and being told, well, guess what, you can have a supporting, stable, loving, thriving home with a warm bed, 3 cooked meals, mom and dad there to support you, or had the capacity to support you mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. Or guess what? You could go out in the streets, live in the cold, and sell drugs, or sell your body to survive. I don't ever remember that, and maybe it's just that I blocked it out, but all recollection says it was not that way, right? I also like to acknowledge the fact that when girls are out surviving, there's 2 ways that we survive in the streets. One is by selling drugs, the other is by selling their bodies. And I acknowledge the privilege that I had for good connections, so I didn't have to sell my body. Because I don't know if I would be where I'm at today if I had to be there, if that's where I had to be, and that was the only choice I was given. And I know a lot of people, a lot of friends that I would say were more than friends, my sisters, that weren't given that privilege and aren't here today. And that's really a harsh reality, right? It's a super harsh reality that they've either died from overdose, their partners have killed them, or they've killed themselves, or they're incarcerated, or they're still out in the streets. And that's what we're doing as a community, right? It's hard and it's easy to blame the system. I've come to this place in my walk because I am a burn it down kind of person, right? Like this is all messed up, and I'm a prison abolitionist. And I do believe that we should burn it down. I've switched that over now into, I'm going to concentrate on building in the new world. There's 2 parts of abolition. There's the burning down and there's the building. And if we concentrate on the burning down, they won. Because that's where our energy goes, is into this destruction and fighting and coming against. And yes, there's a time and a place for that, but really, if the system was, if we woke up tomorrow and everything was burnt to the ground, I can tell you this, we ain't ready. Something just as bad or worse is going to come in its place, because we, as a people, as a community, as a village, are not ready to take care of our people. I grew up in a family that was abusive on many different levels. My grandfather sexually molested my mom, and then he sexually molested me for a lot of years. And my mom was dealing with her own trauma from that. He was a very, not a nice person on any level. And the amount of trauma that he inflicted on my mother and her family, her brothers and sisters, and my grandma, was, I couldn't even imagine. She grew up with him in prison, or wishing he was in prison. And when he was out, she didn't know how to protect me. And we lived in a small town, and so there was no, and she worked all the time, my dad worked all the time, they worked at meatpacking plants or what have you, because we had to survive, because we were poor, right? We didn't come from privilege. And I can remember a few things about my childhood, and we would always go to my grandmother's house. So they divorced, and we'd go to my grandmother's house, and she had a big family, and all of us cousins would come together. And I can remember being about 4 years old, laying on the couch there, holding my breath, wishing that I could die, because it hurt so bad. And I can remember being about 11 in my room, cutting my wrists, just waiting for the pain to go away, because I did not know how to stop the pain. I didn't even know at that time what it was, because our brains are so magnificent that they can block these things out. So it blocks out because it knows you can't handle it, but then what it doesn't do is just take it away, right? So then I thought I was crazy. What is wrong with me? What the hell is wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? I'm not normal. I started running away from home. I started doing drugs because I didn't know how to stop the pain. And if I didn't have drugs, I would have killed myself. So I say this quite a bit. I'm like, methamphetamine saved my life. And people are like, what in the hell is she talking about? But it's a reality. It hurt so physically bad in my chest and in my heart that I couldn't breathe. And I didn't know how to survive with that amount of pain. And I didn't know where it was coming from. I couldn't say, well, it was because this happened. So I could start to work through it because my brain had shut that off. So I started running away. My dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict. My mom had mental health issues that were happening. And I started running away because I was abusive. And because I started running away and my parents could not afford to pay for me to be incarcerated, I was given up as a ward of the state. And when I was given up as a ward of the state, anytime that I would get placed somewhere, be it an institution or my parents' house, if I left there, it was an escape charge. So I would leave my home, my parents would call, and I would be charged with escape. And so I became a extremely high flight risk, right? And when you have that nailed on you, anytime you are picked up, you're going to get the highest level because you are an extreme, you have history of escape, a history of running. I was never charged with a real crime. At the age of 14, I was taken to Sauk Centre. And I was just sitting here and I was like, I hadn't thought about this, but I remember the drive there. And again, I don't remember much because my brain can't handle all of those things and the memories of it. But I remember being shackled by my feet, shackled around a belly chain. And not just a chain, but it was at that time it was a leather belt. And my arms were put in leather straps, held down. And I remember them stopping, they stopped to get food because it was such a long drive. And I had to eat my burger like this and asking them, can you just let one arm go? And they said, no, we can't because you're at flight risk. So when I got to Sauk Centre, they had a policy that you had to be in, I think it was called Anthony House, which was the lockdown unit, until, you could only be there up to 10 days. And it was your intake, right? Well, it was a single cell room with no bathroom. And I ended up being in there for 6 months. No contact with anybody else. They would bring us out to eat because they didn't have food in there. So we would, with no bathroom, they were supposed to come around once an hour to see if we had to go to the bathroom. Well, they wouldn't do that. And if we knocked on the door, then they wouldn't come around at all. And we were being disruptive. And if we were being disruptive, we didn't get to go eat. So there would be days that we wouldn't get to eat. And however they did it, and I believe it was because they would schedule court dates for me, then they could keep me in this unit longer, right? And it ended up being about 6 months that I was there. And they would take me out and you would get strip searched. And you would get to take a 3-minute shower. And I remember the guards standing there while you're taking your 3-minute shower. Male guards standing there while you're taking your 3-minute shower. And I was very shy, you could say, extremely shy at that time. And it killed me every time. I remember laying in that cell and you could see outside because there's a window that if I got up, I could look outside a little bit. We weren't allowed to use the phones, so I didn't have any contact with my family. it was probably one of the loneliest times of my life, and I think back now, and when I can logically think, I was 14, I was a baby, because I had two 14-year-olds now, right? And I'm like, you were 14, and they can't handle sitting in the room much by themselves. They can't do much at all by themselves. You know, they're like, no. And it's been like I said, it's been a journey to connect. Oh, this is why this is why you never felt home, why you never felt connection. Because I didn't get out of there and go home. I was locked away. I was in other facilities. I was passed back and forth and here and there and everywhere for a lot of years. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. Why couldn't I be normal? And we always talk about the trauma that happens before. What got you to this place? No one talks about the trauma of being incarcerated. As an adult or in listening about it as a child, right? And I wrote this one time, just talking, it was on Mother's Day, and I thought about Mother's Day. It was just like 2 years ago, and I sat there and I just really started to feel and think about it, and I'm like, being able to spend Mother's Day with my mom and my children. And I thought about, for so many years I had to disassociate from Mother's Day because I didn't get to spend it with my mom. Mother's Day was just another day. I couldn't think about not being with my family because my family didn't want me. I didn't have a family, right? And you can't stay sitting in that place or even think about that, or you won't survive incarceration, right? And then I became a mother and I was incarcerated and I had to disassociate from my children. The one thing that I thought that I was here for, right? Like when I became pregnant with my oldest son, I was like, yes, I'm never gonna let my demons affect this baby. I'm gonna be the best mom because I know what it's like and I know what I needed. And I failed miserably at that. I failed him miserably because I didn't know how to connect. I didn't know how to have a family. I'm just learning it now. I'm just learning that it's okay and you are supposed to go and touch your kids. Right? My 5-year-old has never been separated from me, like pretty much ever, right? And it shows, right? That is my sidekick. He's ride or die. He'll tell me, Mom, he seen me upset one day. He said, Mom, don't worry. I'm always going to be here and I'm going to be on your back. Saying, I'm always going to have your back. I was like, uh-huh. Yeah. But even with him, I have to remind myself, go and put your arms around him, snuggle him. Put this, you have this energetic wall of safety. Don't touch me. I don't want to be touched because every time that I've been touched and being incarcerated, you can't touch. You can't touch. I can't touch you because I'm going to go to SEG. I can't touch you because I don't know what you want from me. And I'm retraining my brain to say it's okay. It's okay to connect. It's okay to have roots. And I think about I remember trying to Google, like, Sauk Centre. Let me just see if I could, whatever happened. And there's nothing. It's just like gone. I'm like, did I make this up? There's no information. You can't find anything. You can't find it on the DOC website. You can't find anything. And I was like, this was so many people, so many girls, so many people and girls, and what they did was not okay. And this was in 1990. And so when you think about it, it's not that long ago. And it really isn't that long ago because it happens to our girls today. When we talk about incarceration and women's incarceration, and when we talk about incarceration anyways, we really have, okay, we're talking about male incarceration because that seems like but do we know that women are the fastest rising rate of incarceration by 832% since 1980? Not 8%, not 32%, 832%. And those women that are incarcerated have come from incarceration as a girl. Yes. It's a cycle. It's a cycle and it continues to be a cycle. And we forget about them. We forget about our girls, and we have one champion in the room that does not let anybody forget about the girls, and I am so thankful for that, because we send them somewhere else. We forget about them. Oh, they're going, and you don't think, that can't be that bad. They're gonna go to some, group home, and it's gonna be like slumber parties and all these other things, and the resources are so little for girls. And I remember even for myself, I was put into boys facilities, boys shelters, co-mingled with the boys and sexually assaulted because there was no one, they didn't have enough staff. And I was the only girl that was there because they didn't have anywhere else to put us. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and to start to stand up for our girls. And we see the Me Too movement, and we've been instrumental in pushing for, when we're talking about the Me Too movement, are you talking about women that are incarcerated? Are you talking about girls that are incarcerated? Are we talking about that? Because Me Too, right? Us too. And to think about the reason that the girls are incarcerated. It's not because of crimes. It's not because of crimes. And this was happening in the 1930s, and it's happening today. They're not because of crimes, it's because lack of resources. And when we talk about this and we say, oh my God, what is the system doing? But I've challenged people, and I've said, even if a child does the most unthinkable things, right? If they murder someone, that's our responsibility as the village. Because when the child does not feel embraced by the village, it will burn it to feel its warmth. And that is on us, not a system. We can build something, right? We can offer space. We can connect with people and find out what their story is and how we can support them. That's how we end mass incarceration, right? And we're doing a lot of those things now. We're working towards that now. And I'm going to let you speak a little bit more, and then if at the end I can even talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you can do to help support us in some of the work that we're doing.
I have literally no idea what to say. I mean, it really almost just takes my breath away, and not in a good way, but well, one thing I do want to say before I forget, as I heard people speak in this audience about your own expertise that you're bringing to this subject, I would love to be in conversation with you, so please reach out to me through my website, because I am interested in talking to historians, to people working with girls' justice, all of it. When I wrote this story, I imagined this story. I mean, this is what is very difficult for me, because, as Tonja says, you couldn't have more of a whiteout if you tried on this. There is no record of it. And there is not, until tonight, a record of a survivor talking about being there. I mean, you can't find the record of it. And so I had this space. I had the knowledge that my mother's mother had been there at 15. And I had a mother who was a wonderful human being, but could not bond with her children. By her own cheerful admission, it didn't bother her. She wasn't sad about it. She just said, I just can't bond with my children. I'm perfectly fine otherwise. And, I was like, what in the world? Once I had my own children, I thought, what happened to my mother that she couldn't bond with her children? Something had to have happened. And, I would say this to her, and she'd say, what are you thinking? I'm like, I don't know. I think something happened. And one day when I was over at her apartment, her condo, and my kids were swimming in her pool, I said, Mom, I think something happened. And she was adopted and she knew that. And I said, let's get your records. And she said, what do you want with them? And I was like, I really think there's going to be something there. We've got, you know, everyone's an addict, we've got suicide, we've got commitment, we've got people in and out of the justice system among my siblings, you know. Our life has turned out to be pretty much of a mess, inexplicably so, you know, and it has to begin somewhere. But I did not know this is what it would lead me to. However, when my mother and I were there for the first time and the only time seeing this file together, seeing she was born there, seeing that she had been institutionalized as an infant as part of it, that she had been taken, discovering the sentence that her mother had wanted to keep her, which was actually quite devastating to my mom, and also very affirming to know that she said she wanted me. She must have loved me. I mean, just hearing my mother say that as something that she would not have even wanted to admit to herself for, you know, 70 years, that this mattered to her. The 6-year sentence, all of it was very difficult, you know, for my mother to look at, but one of the first things I thought, besides what had she done, was I thought she was sexually abused. I just thought it immediately when you've got a 15-year-old with a child and a 6-year sentence, you know. And I was about 2 pages into the file when I hit that. I have had other descendants of survivors, so have reached out to me. I have had a few emails from survivors, including one woman who was at Sauk Centre who said she slit her wrist and no one cared. You know, she said she was in solitary and she slit her wrist with a light bulb and they just let her bleed. But everyone who has reached out to me has said no one has ever brought this up before. You know, the descendants, the survivors, everyone has said this has been a secret. You know, this has been silenced. And I think one of the things that I have carried with me so much is the power of shame in silencing these victims. You know, because what happened that no one came out and said this happened to me? Why didn't they? Why didn't they say that? Well, they didn't, you know. The women came out, the girls came out of there, and they wanted no one to ever know they had been there. So that was it, you know. They didn't want their children to know. They didn't want, if they ever married, they didn't want their spouses to know. They wanted that erased, and yet it couldn't get erased because they carried it. And I only imagined all of this. I mean, this is so powerful to me because I feel that both that I carry this trauma in me as a human being, like put onto the earth with the memory of this, so that when I was writing it, I almost knew what she felt like driving there, what happened, what she felt like being one of those girls. I had nobody saying this is how it felt. There was absolutely no one to tell me this is what it was like to have been a girl at Sauk Centre. And to hear Tonja speak about it or have other people say you have told the truth about something is incredibly powerful and troubling to me. How lovely if I had only truly made it up, you know, but somehow I just kept asking myself, how would she have felt? How would she have felt? How would she have felt? And there's just somehow enough in my body from having been the descendant of her to have the answer to that. So, but I really am so grateful to you for this story, because what I hope most of all with the book was that I believed when I did it, I kept thinking, people will come forward, people will say, this happened to me, you know, and we can have maybe not justice for the girls, but the girls' stories can be known and they can be at least vindicated in the way that they've done the work in Ireland around the Magdalene laundries. They're doing some work around this in Canada. They are not doing work around this, as always, in America, because like so many of the American atrocities, it never happened, or it happened and we're fine now, so why look back? But the reason we need to look back is because it isn't done, it's present.
Questions?
Or just a comment, I wanted to get in and say thank you to you for sharing your story just on many levels, but I think like you have to sit there then and kind of like see our like straight faces, when really like my heart is just like bursting and flowing with compassion and empathy, but like you might be seeing like anger on our faces or whatever, but so like your vulnerability is not only makes us like care about you, but it's also really like makes me excited to get my kids tomorrow, and like, so your work is, whatever you're seeing on our faces, know that it sparks a lot of love too, in addition to heartbreak.
Luckily, I can feel energy and not just.
Yeah. I was like kind of thinking too. I was like,
no, I can feel it. Right? Like that's one thing I say to my kids. You don't get to just pick what you feel, right? And when you open up and you start to feel, you can start to feel everybody and everything in the right places, right? Does anybody else have any questions or comments or talk about the book?
Yeah, you said about the. Well, actually, it's a question about, you said the records were locked for 100 years? Yes. So if it's 1911 up to 1920, wouldn't those be able to be now?
Probably, maybe you can get them now, but I was looking for I'm sorry.
I spoke out of turn. 1911 to 1920, yes, probably those can be accessed now, but I was looking for a 1935 record, and because that's when my mother had been there. And, those will be sealed till 2035. My mother wasn't going to make it that long. And she was the only one who could ask for it. I couldn't ask for it. And even if I could have, possibly after her death, I'm not sure I will be here in 2035. So I felt a real urgency, and we did make a strong case to the court, and the court did grant it, and I'd like to see other family members. But the problem is that most family members do not understand they are descendants of this, because the girls didn't tell. So what they understand is maybe that they were raised in a family where there was a lot of trauma, a lot of suffering. This is what I'm hearing from people when they're writing to me. Their mother had a lot of issues, but never said, I have been there. They maybe have found this out some other way, either through the state census, because the census listed the inmates in 1930. And then in the next year, 1940s, yeah, so the girls were the inmates and they were listed when the census takers went to Sauk Centre. So sometimes people are finding out that way. Sometimes in my mother's case, her birth certificate said Sauk Centre. She had been told she was born in Minneapolis. So Bill Milliken, who is a historian, and Bill and I were at a party together, and I was talking to Bill about my mother being born in Sauk Centre, and Bill said, oh, she was born at the girls' school. And I was like, what's that? And he said, it was where they sent the girls, and he said, those records are at the History Center. And her record's probably there. And I was like, oh my God. I called the History Center and was put on hold for a long, long time, and when they came back, they said, yeah, the records are here, but they are sealed for 100 years, so you can't see them. And that was when I, found out about moving through the system with the courts and making a case because of the trauma that had occurred multi-generationally in the family, or intergenerationally.
Actually, just to follow up, because I was really interested in the whole record protection thing, and because I also work with a student who's an adoptee and has gotten very involved in the adoption rights movement.
Yes, this has
I was gonna say, it seems to me that that's another angle, because they're actually forcing, because adoptees were not allowed to have access to their own records. And there's been a lot of pushback there, and it feels like this, again, you can understand why, again, for the protection, you wouldn't want just an average nosy person to look around, but if it's, again, your family, I think there's been a lot of success there in trying to get access to this. Secrecy is astonishing, and it's just the fact that nobody knows is, yeah, I mean,
I do want to say, and I'm sure there's people in the audience that know more about this, the adoption records are still sealed in Minnesota. They are still fighting to get those adoption records opened. But they have, after a certain year, they opened them, but they are remaining sealed. The fight goes on at the state legislature every year. My friends are involved in that fight, and we are one of the states that remain with the sealed records. So there are many, many adoptees in Minnesota that cannot access their information. The book is also in many ways about that, because it has to do with what happens when your record is sealed as an adoptee and you will never know, the truth. Thank you.
This one, I feel like Phil Donahue.
You look just like Phil Donahue.
What was the official name of the school in Sauk Centre, and what ridiculous agency was the umbrella agency in the state? Was it under?
It was the Minnesota Homeschool for Girls Sauk Centre. It had another number of names. It was founded in 1911 to take the girls out of the boys' school at Red Wing. Even at that time, there were only a few girls at Red Wing. I think of this as, if we build it, they will come. I mean, they built this institution, they made it a big institution, and the very first group of girls, aren't we a growing institution? It says on the back of one of the postcards. The very first group of girls were immoral, and that that was true in my grandmother's group too. So when you see, even at the opening, it was girls by their own admission, which is quoted in the book, girls immoral or in danger of becoming immoral. That's what it was open for. Never for girls who had committed crimes.
And was it under the justice system?
Yes, it's the criminal justice system. They were inmates.
Department of Corrections. Well, it was.
At that time, it was called the Board of Control, which I like even better.
We should point out that the girls are now back at Red Wing. So I was wondering if either of you had some numbers to give us, just in terms of over the years of approximately how many females served time at Sauk Centre? And what was the housing, what was the capacity for housing?
I don't know during Tonja's time, during my grandmother's time, I think they had the capacity for 300. So I think there was 150 admitted that year or something. If we go by every single year from 1911 on, that's a lot of girls. And that's just Minnesota.
Okay. And then are you going to get to the part about the domestic service and the jobs that the girls were sent out to?
Yes.
We got one question.
I just have a question. So, up until a year ago, I was the former director of the Hennepin County Homeschool Girls Program. And so that was a DOC licensed facility for girls. And many of the things that Tonja talked about were practices that we still did last year. Lock girls up in their rooms for long periods of time in isolation.
Right.
Keep them isolated. I mean, so that happens today.
Yes.
The girls are not at Red Wing. That is still only a boys' facility. There are 2 local facilities for girls involved in the juvenile justice system. One is Dakota County, which is a detention center, and the other is West Central Regional, which is a detention center in Moorhead. And so both of those facilities are detention centers. And so those girls don't have access to the outside. They're sentenced for 6 to 9 months, and the majority of those, all the girls that we had when I was at the home school were sexually exploited.
Yes.
That's the population of girls that we worked with. And then just one other thing was, of all the abuse that I saw amongst the girls that came in, nothing like stomped on their heart and soul like sexual abuse. Like that was the one thing. Like they could handle the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, the neglect. It was that, you know, not addressing the root cause of that sexual violence that led them to drugs as a way to cope, theft as a way to survive. And so we are still criminalizing girls for surviving.
Right, for being victims of sexual assault. Yeah, sexual abuse. Your question was about the servitude that the girls had. The girls were paroled at around 18, so again, till 21, every girl until 21. So I met with a woman who brought over her grandmother's file to my house. The grandmother entered at 12. She had been impregnated by a 25-year-old man, a lovely man, a well-dressed man, a banker. And he was able to say that he felt certain he could find other men to say that they had also had sex with her. So he appreciated that they hadn't gone to his employer or anything. So anyway, off she went. He went on to have a, I'm sure, fabulous career. But she entered at 12, she was until 21. The thing that you said that I think is so interesting is every time they escape, they're just there longer. You know, that's how you go from there to, shopping. You try to run away from the situation there. But at 18, the girls were trained during my grandmother's time to be servants. That was the training they received there. They did not consider them to need much education. They did get minimal education. But they were, at 18, paroled into homes where they had a visitor who was a probation officer, but they didn't use that term then. They used visitor. And the visitor came like twice a year to see how they were doing. The runaway and escape statistics are very high on those girls. Interestingly, the woman who brought her grandmother's record over, that grandmother somehow was impregnated during that time that she was on the parole. If the girls were returned from parole, they were put into isolation and held there for 3 months, 6 months. They were punished for having been returned. They were punished for having escaped parole. My grandmother did escape parole and was not reapprehended, but she would have remained then a fugitive for the rest of her life.
Sheila, I'm sorry, I haven't read your book yet, so I don't know if you talked about this or not, but regardless, maybe you could speak about it now. Can you talk a little bit about the girls at Sauk Centre who were then also forcibly sterilized, the eugenic sterilization that was happening at Sauk Centre? Because they were declared evil.
Because it was the heyday of eugenics movement. But you know, I only see brief mentions of the sterilization that happened at Sauk Centre. That doesn't mean they weren't happening. Where they were definitely happening was in Kansas, because at that exact same time there was a outcry in Kansas for the girls who were forcibly sterilized. So I don't know exactly what happened at Sauk Centre with the eugenics.
Do you know the work of Molly Ladd Taylor? She's a historian from Canada who did some writing about eugenic sterilization at Sauk Centre.
Oh, at Sauk Centre?
Yeah, it was 20 years. I did some research for her in those files at the Historical Society when I was in graduate school 20 years ago. So there's something out there.
Yes, okay, good, thank you. I do know that the girls, that there were what they called dim girls at Sauk Centre. The dim girls, I can find records that they were sent out for sterilization. So when they did their year-end report about how many had their teeth fixed and how many, you know, there were dim girls that were sent out for sterilization.
Is there any connection to the Sauk Centre to the Owatonna homeschool for children that they had for years?
In 1911, when Fanny French Morris, or 1919, when she was giving a speech at the welfare, the Minnesota welfare gathering, there were people from Owatonna there speaking, you know, so they also spoke on these other systems that fell under the sort of the way Minnesota, how beautifully Minnesota cares for its own, was the theme of that conference. That's online, and there's a reference to it in my book, so you can find that document.
I have something just to kind of throw out there. This talk of the power of the shame, keeping the women, girls from talking about it and shutting it off in their families. In my family, my mother was kicked out of her house when she was 16. Her youngest sister was kicked out on the streets when she was 13. A long time ago. My mom stayed with an aunt and uncle for a while. I don't know, and I don't know a lot of this story. This is just because I'm 60 years old now, a little bit I've heard from some family members, and not from my mother. And her aunt and uncle, for some reason, my mom, you know, of course, was upsetting, right, being thrown out in her family, and her father was a brute, but they committed her to a mental institution, and she ended up getting shock treatment there, and then eventually came out and had a hard time. She was on her own, right, and really young, and ended up recommitting herself and had shock treatment again. And all I heard about that was the second time her whole experience there was really terrible. And that's all I know.
Can I say something? I mean, part of incarceration, which that is a form, right? One of the things about that, and when you're talking about youth incarceration, and I know for myself, in my mind, is that sadly incarceration starts to feel like the only home that you have. And part of the times that I could feel myself, I've been able to work through the things now and to understand, but there would be a lot of times I just wish that I was locked back up. And I would, you know, hi, God, I just wish, and I would find myself saying that, and still some days find myself, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is, I just wish that I was locked up again.
So
it would be so much
She was
easier.
having a hard time, and then went back to where she felt she didn't have to worry about things, right? Although
only place
it
she felt
ended up
safe.
being terrible. Yeah. So the second time, I guess, was really terrible. But and my mom, you know, the many repercussions of that with my mom, you know, not wanting to be with doctors and dentists, and she's died 2 years ago. But and in and out of hospitals and institutions and all growing up, and she was, you know, anyways. But yeah, I don't know much.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you talk about knowing it in your DNA, because we talk about generational trauma, and it is in our DNA, right? We carry those stories, whether we know what they are, whether we can retell those stories or not. We carry them, so we pass them on to our children, right? And it's continued to be passed on and continue to be passed on. And then we come into this world wondering what the hell.
And I think this is one reason I never had children,
yeah,
right? Because I don't want it to be anything but how I turned out, whatever, right?
And one of the beautiful things about that is that then when we heal, that's also passed on, right? And so our healing, just like our trauma, our healing is passed on also, and that resilience is passed on also. So it's not hopeless, right? Because we could sit there and think, well, fuck. What am I doing? I got, but what are we doing here? Like, we're doomed, but we're pretty amazing creatures, right? When we start to connect and we start to, know, okay, wait a minute, I do have it in me to start to make these shifts, as little as they might be, and just if it's even just an awareness, right? Because for myself, to just be able to say being incarcerated was traumatic. To say that and to allow that, because I was so shamed. You did something wrong, there's something wrong with you, you're crazy, you're a bad child, you can't get it right, what's wrong? Just do the right thing. You deserve to be locked up. And for me to be able to I still deal with that, right? Like, I still wake up every day thinking those same things, like, you're gonna be locked up and you're gonna screw up, and that's where you deserve to be, but I can stop myself and start to retrain that right now. So when we're talking about, again, when you're meeting people and we're wondering, why the hell do they keep going back to jail? Yeah. It's not, maybe not a choice. They just don't know what steps to do to break the cycle. Because they don't know why they keep, that's the only place that they feel able to take a breath.
What's the failure? Or that's where you're getting food. That's where there are people seeing that you're, yeah.
No, I'm just wondering how you found each other when, as you said,
right here.
This one. Okay.
This one, right here.
So do you know, like, we were saying how nobody talked
I have to use
it.
this because they're taping it.
Okay. Nobody talked about it. Didn't even know it existed. And you're a survivor of it, that it sounds like you're a unicorn, like no one else talks about it. So how did you guys all find each other?
I don't know, did I mention even Sauk Centre at one time?
No, someone told me.
Yeah.
Someone told me too. It was Kaylee.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was at the prison, the MPWW, the Prison Writing Project night, and you introduced me to Kaylee. And she said, oh, you have to meet Tonja. She was at Sauk Centre. And then I reached out to you and Colleen.
So we might say a word about Kaylee, who is not here tonight because she's in the hospital. She's eagerly awaiting the tape. We should all say hi. Kaylee and Sheila came together to my class, Engendering Justice, which is about the lives of women and girls who are involved in the justice system. Every one of my students and Kaylee had read Sheila's book within a month after it came out. And the conversation that just played out between Tonja and Sheila, this happened to me, I imagined this. This happened to me, I imagined this. The parallels was very similar. I want to say, we're getting close to 8:30. There are handouts, and if you didn't get one, I think there are some by the door. There are a few facts that are there, and there's also a little bit of further information. 2 fairly recent reports about the sexual abuse to prison pipeline. And one of them is 72 pages long, the other one is 48 pages, but there are executive summaries and infographics. If you feel like you want to talk about this with someone, please share a few of the facts so people will feel like they know enough to investigate more. And then maybe Tonja should say something about what to do if you want to get involved. So I'm on the board of the OSTARA initiative, which is an umbrella organization of a prison doula project in Minnesota and one in Alabama. OSTARA always is looking for supporters.
And so I am connected with that right now. We Rise, it falls underneath OSTARA also. And like I said, we're a collective of formerly incarcerated women and girls and non-binary folks building a new world, in a sense, right? The world that we need to be able to survive out here. Right, I mean, there's, on a policy level, because we're getting ready to jump into this next session with kicking down doors, we have a couple policies that we are working really hard this session, and one of them is called the Healthy Start Act. And this started from our push to end incarceration for pregnant women, birthing people. And from that, have built a partnership with the current administration at the DOC, and they have picked it up, and so has the governor's office. And we are hoping to not only end incarceration, and this is on a state level, this doesn't affect county jails at all, to end incarceration for birthing people and young mothers that would be in Shakopee. So if you have an infant that's up to 8 months, or you're pregnant and you will be out up to 8 months, hopefully we can put in for more time if needed. But the majority, I think it's 85% of the birthing people that are incarcerated at Shakopee are there sentenced to less than 6 months. And so it would end family separation, right, there. And so, because what happens now is after you give birth, you have about 36 hours, and then they come back and they take the baby from you, and you're separated from the baby, and you go back to the facility, and at this point are still required to do a very invasive strip search, 36 hours after giving birth, and you can spend, however, you could never know where your child is. There's no law that says that they need to tell you where your child is. So, that's one. So it's the Healthy Start Act, which again is, we are hoping is going to, we keep hearing it's going to be low-hanging fruit, but we don't know how that goes with our Senate. Okay.
Do you know who's authoring that though?
I don't know, so the DOC and the governor are Kerri, or they're gonna bring it forth. I don't know who they have that's gonna author it, but it will be out. And then also, We Rise is going to be putting forth the primary caregiver bill, which will require courts, and this is on a county level, require courts to do community sentencing instead of incarceration when a person is a primary caregiver of a minor child. And that, at this point, we had to do some language changes because it was going to, they did try to say that it was for all non-violent crimes, and in Minnesota, everything is a violent crime. So if I have a dirty baggie of cocaine with just residue, I'm a violent offender in Minnesota. So we have changed some language. We were hoping to not have that be a part of it at all, because even if in the cases of murder in the United States, 90% of the women that are serving time for murder, it's against their abuser. And they don't have any studies on assaults, but we would say that it's most likely the same amount of number. But this is what we have right now. That's Representative Heather Edelson is authoring that bill on the House side, and we're going to continue to push to see if we can get it on the Senate, and we need people to do that. We are also opening up, like I said, the first house, and we can use any sort of help or donations. We need beds. We need beds, and any other ideas for funding or any of those things, or if you have a burning desire to come and volunteer and bring a skill set to the women and children. It's going to be really focused around reunification with children. And we also have another house in Minneapolis that will be opening soon. So that's some of the things that we would love if you feel a burning desire to change the world.
Do I have a final thing to say?
Oh.
Is anyone advocating to bring the children's program back to Shakopee? We used to have this wonderful program where the kids got to come on Friday night and spend time with their mothers, read stories, and have family time. And it's been gone for I think about 5 years now.
Yep. So that used to be a separate unit, and and they are not advocating to bring that back at this point. They're really pushing to look at how do we reduce incarceration and putting the funding and the resources into reducing incarceration for those moms and those children, right? So there is some other programs that just did not pass this last budget year, like the prison doula project and parenting classes and some other things that, and a mama bus, which would be giving transportation to children to go see their mothers. We're also really pushing to, and we've heard that it's going to happen, but to end strip searches for the women, starting with the women, because anytime that they get a visitor, they have to be strip searched. So we choose not to have visitors and not have our children come because of that. It's very traumatic, so we're pushing for that, and it was supposed to have been implemented this month, but we haven't seen any movement yet. So, did you want to close? Yeah.
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I mean, I think just gathering here is really powerful. It's really affirming to me to see so many people interested in this, so many people in this room that are already doing good work and are interested in continuing this work. One of the things that people ask me all the time when I'm doing interviews is, well, how come no one knew this was going on? You know, and I said, who knows what's going on now? I mean, how many of us are sitting around wondering what's happening at Shakopee, what's happening at the Hennepin County School for the Girls or the Dakota? Nobody knows what's going on. So I think knowing what's going on, being involved and caring, and also being willing to move beyond the paradigm of blaming the girls, blaming the women is huge. And just moving in that direction would mean the world to me. Ta-da.